All right. All right, welcome to this live event. We're going to talk about the 3 different things you need to be doing in your backswing to create consistency, to be a better ball striker. But this is a guide I want to walk you through that's really going to help you improve those qualities of motions in your backswing, get you in better positions so you can score better and you can play better. So here we go. So number 1, I want to talk about the first move in the takeaway. Then we're going to talk about the top and getting in the right position there. And then I want to talk a little bit about how this hip right here, the rotation of this hip, how that should look. Those are the 3 things we're going to talk about. So in the takeaway, what I want to discuss is we're going to talk about the positions the club needs to be in and how the body helps make that consistent. Because one thing that's important is we have to build a golf swing that controls the club face. And so the takeaway is a good place to start. So when we do the takeaway, we want to make sure that club stays out in front of us at all times right here. We don't like the club getting behind us. There's a few players on tour that it gets a little behind them, but it's because they go into flexion early on the takeaway, which tends to get a little inside. That's a great matchup for somebody that likes to get into a lot of flexion. But for most golfers don't get into a lot of flexion. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that when we take the club back, we're keeping the hands stacked like this and not rolling them open. Stacked like this. And then we're hinging the club towards the middle of our body. So as we take the club back, we're keeping our hands stacked, and then we're hinging the club towards our body. That's obviously exaggerated, but that's how we keep the club in front of us. So here, start to hinge this way. Most people will hinge this way, or they'll hinge going this way instead of hinging up. So we don't want to hinge this way. We want to hinge this way up with the wrist and not this way. That's probably going to take a lot of mental focus to get to where you can do that, but you've got to work on that upward motion and not the inside motion. So let's do it again. So as you take the club back, we're going to hinge up, just like that, and we're going to keep the club in front of us instead of letting it get dragged behind us. Also to note, to keep that club face stable, we want to make sure the club face is not opening into the backswing. So that'll come from getting the club inside, but what we don't want to do is get the face pointing to the sky like this. I see a lot of clients rolling that open, and that causes face control issues because we can agree that square is even with the spine like this, right? So if you look at the leading edge of the club and my spine, those match. So if we turn and we lean over, that is still matching my spine. So square on the backswing is the takeaway matching the spine, okay? So if the toe's up, it's open. If the face is more down than your spine angle, that is closed. So if you're a slicer, I definitely think your face needs to be square, maybe even slightly closed. If you tend to hook the ball, there can be some debate in there, but if you're super closed, go back to square. You know, you could try to get it a hair open on the takeaway, but I definitely don't want it straight toe up. Somewhere between toe up and then matching your spine to kind of help you get that club face from hooking or from closing too much, which causes a hook. But most of the time when we see hooks, it's a bad release pattern. Now, real quick, I'm gonna go do both camera angles here. And I want you to see the face-on version of the takeaway so you can see the movement here. So with a good takeaway, we want a wide chest turn. We want to make sure the chest is moving so we're not doing an arm swing for the very beginning of our swing. So what I want you to do is feel like when you turn, you're keeping the elbows straight, but you're also not moving your arms, you're just turning your chest to do the takeaway. So when you do your first takeaway move, you're gonna turn your chest, and you're gonna see there's a very big gap between the butt of the club and your thigh. That's how you create width. Most clients of mine will hinge the club the wrong way, this way. They'll break the elbow, they lose all this width, and then they end up throwing it back down with their arms because they didn't create width. They didn't turn their thoracic spine, their upper body. So what you wanna do is take your chest, turn it, face it away from the target there, get this nice width right here, and then you're gonna hinge to get the club in front of you. So width, boom. And you're going to see I'm creating a lot of width there because I'm using my chest and keeping my arms in sync with the chest turn, because it's called a connected takeaway. You want to make sure you're connected in that move and you're not having a separation of where you move the club a lot, you break the elbow, and you get it behind you. So if you want to create some consistency in your game and get some stability over the club face, create the width, get the club in the right position in front of you, but then also get the face in the right position. If you have any comments, please send in a comment so I can answer any questions towards the end of the live. Definitely want to help you out. So post those comments and I'll definitely get to them towards the end. So let's talk about the next piece. So let's talk more about the backswing at this point. And you know what? I think I'll leave that on that split view. I got a lot of comments saying that people like the split view, so I'm going to leave it there. Okay, so let's talk about the next move, the top of the swing. So when we go to the top of the swing, we're doing a good takeaway here. We want to make sure that we get enough depth in the backswing because the majority of my clients need depth to help them come from the inside. There are a smaller number of clients that don't need that, but I'm going to talk about why it's important to create some depth in the backswing. Now, what is depth? Depth is how far the hands are behind you. So if you look at this angle here, are your hands out here in front of you or are they deeper behind you here? The deeper you get your hands, the easier it is to come from the inside without having to do some crazy shallowing move with the wrist. John Rahm, he is not very deep with his hands. His hands are very far in front of him, up here. But John Rahm has a very flat shaft with a lot of flexion, which gets the club behind him. That's a good matchup. Most of my clients cannot go into that much flexion, and it's hard for them to get it that flat. And again, that still takes a lot of body rotation to be able to do that. So that's not a good matchup for most of my clients. So what I would like most of you to do is get your good takeaway, and then when you get to the top of the swing, I want you to feel like you get your hands deep and lined up over your heel. So what you can do is take an alignment rod. I'm going to grab one here. Take an alignment rod, and you're going to put it even with your heel, okay? And you're going to feel like when you take your backswing, good takeaway, big turn, you get your hands lined up over that line. That'll help get the depth in the backswing. Now, to do that, you have to make a big enough turn. We'll get into the hip turn in a second, but to get the hands deeper, we have to make a bigger shoulder turn and a bigger hip turn. Because the common faults I see is it usually starts with the takeaway. They do this, they do this. Sometimes they pick their arms up and they don't get it deep, and when they turn coming down, it's straight up over the top. One, because they didn't create any width, and then number two, they didn't rotate, so there's no way to get the hands behind them. And so because the club's here and they start turning on the downswing because they know they need to, we come over the top. Okay, so in saying that again, what we have to do is good takeaway, feel like you get a good turn through the hips, good turn through the shoulders, and then we get those hands deeper back towards our heel. Okay, that's going to give us more room to come from the inside and hit a draw, especially if you're an over-the-top player. Now, if you're already stuck inside, it could be that you're too flat. We're not talking about that today. So if you're one of those players, please leave a comment down below and let me make a video specific to you. But I need to know if any of you that have that problem are watching, because then I can make a video specific to that. So again, leave some comments if you have any questions. So again, good takeaway, deep hands here, and that'll help us give us more room to swing from the inside. Because if you do this and lift, you're going to see this look like a chopping golf swing. So I'm going to go here, lift. I mean, that was just very steep and down into the ground. Versus if I do a good takeaway, okay, really wide, and then I get the hands deep because I make a big enough shoulder turn, it's going to be a lot easier to hit the golf ball from the inside. So here, through. Lost my balance a little bit. Okay. All right, now, one little tip to help with hip rotation. Okay. I think it's very beneficial for most of my clients to flare this trail toe out just a little bit to give your hip, to make the hip orientation easier to rotate, and it gives you a little more stability in the feet. I don't necessarily think you should be square toed. Okay, so I think it's important to put your trail toe a little open, allows you to get a little bit more coil little bit bigger backswing. If you struggle making a big enough turn into your backswing, could be a little bit of posture, but where I want you to focus on is this lead foot heel. So one thing that can help you get a little bit more turn is as you go to the top of the swing, allow the heel to slightly come off the ground, which will help you get that little bit extra turn. Don't pick it up because I don't want you to come out of posture, but allow it to come up a little bit. And then the good thing about that move that I like so much is you can stomp it down, and it's a great move to start the downswing, but it can also give you that mobility to rotate through the ball, okay? And to get a bigger backswing. All right, so now let's talk about one thing that I see that a lot of players get wrong, and sometimes it has to do with hip mobility issues, but we're gonna bypass that, assuming that's not a problem at the moment. If it is, we can deal with that later in a somewhat private lesson way. So this hip is allowed to coil, but it's not allowed to sway, okay? Our head is allowed to move off the ball, but this hip is not allowed to move laterally on the backswing. On the downswing, for sure. Okay. Now there are some players on tour that do a little bit of a lateral move towards the target at the top of the swing. You're going to need to have a lot of rotation on the downswing to make that match up. So again, that's not a matchup for most of my clients. So here's the best way to practice. You're going to take an alignment rod, put it like this, and you're going to step on it, but you're going to put the alignment rod on the inside of your foot. Okay, this is actually going to try to force you to the outside of your foot, which is what I want it to try to make you do. We don't want it to get it out there, but it's going to make it harder, which will make you activate the appropriate muscles. So I got this alignment rod on the inside of my foot right here. And what I want you to do is I want you to try to keep the pressure on the inside, on that alignment rod, the whole backswing, while you take your trail hip and drive it straight backwards. Okay, just like this. Okay, so as you sit here and do this, you're really going to feel this hip go backwards. You're going to see this leg straighten a little bit because the hip is moving backwards. If you have a lot of excessive bend like this, you're not moving that hip appropriately. So this knee should straighten a little bit, just like that, to allow that hip to move backwards. We don't want it to physically lock out, but allow it, if you're doing it appropriately, that knee should straighten. Okay, so if we talked about the footwork, which also helps aid that, is as you move to the top of your swing and you get that bigger hip turn, you should feel some pressure in your trail foot on the heel. So that pressure should be moving there. Obviously, you can't go with this foot on the heel because then you'll fall backwards, but you'll keep the pressure on the ball of the foot here, heel here, at the top of the swing. So you'll see that motion. So that's going to stop a swing. So if the pressure gets off this alignment rod, you're going to see that lateral movement there. And that's not what we want. We don't want that lateral movement. Okay, so we want it to go straight back. We want it to coil without an excessive amount of sway. And putting this underneath your foot gives you that sensation of feeling, okay, I got to keep that foot driven into the ground, which stops you from swaying, but then also helps the hip go backwards, and it allows that knee to straighten a little bit. Okay, so when you're building that backswing, if you can get that down and get the top of the swing down, you're going to have a lot more stable backswing. So as you take it back, good takeaway, good depth. You can see this hip really coil, pressure staying on the inside of that foot. It's not getting to the outside, because if it did, you would see a sway. Okay. Now, as far as like how much weight should be on the backswing, it's kind of it's not just a simple answer, but to give a simple answer is you want about 75% of your pressure on that foot at the top of the swing. That's not technically right because you're getting here and there's a dynamic weight transfer, but you want to feel yourself load behind the ball and then come back into the ball. What you don't want to do is you don't want to reverse pivot back towards the target and get no pressure on your trail leg, because you can't drive and rotate if all the pressure's on this leg. You can't. You have to have pressure on this leg to be able to transfer that energy and rotate into the golf ball. So let's put those three things together. So if you can get a good takeaway, nice width while keeping the club in front of us and then paying attention to your club face, that'll make a big difference. If you can get to the top and get that depth, getting that little bit bigger turn by allowing this foot to come up, opening that toe a little bit, just working on that quality of motion and getting those hands sitting a little bit deeper versus out here in front of you. Then from there, you can stomp that foot, hit the ball from the inside, and you can rotate with some power, and you'll develop some consistency. And I believe because you're using more of your full body motion, you're gonna start to get some control of this club face, because before you didn't have that. So we wanna gain control of that club face. All right, so here's what I wanna do now. I wanna open this up for questioning and see if I can serve anybody here. So I'm gonna have to jump over here to my computer so that I can click on those questions and allow people to get their questions answered. So, all right. All right, I got one question here. Well, and I think I kind of covered it. So, is it okay for the head to move? Yes, because it's important to protect your spine. You know, stack and tilt came along, and stack and tilt, it works. I don't think it's necessarily a bad move, but the biggest problem is it's not good for the body. It's not a swing that produces longevity. So I'm not necessarily dissing stack and tilt because I think the method works and I think it's helped a lot of golfers. However, there's some risks to it because it causes reverse spine angle. Reverse spine angle is the number one cause of back pain. It's extension with rotation, and that's not if it'll cause back pain, it's when it'll cause back pain. So if you look at one player, Ricky Fowler. So Ricky Fowler struggled with back pain, and it's because he had an excessive amount of rotation, and he kept his head way too still. So he had a lot of mobility, but then he kept his head still, but that would put a lot of stress on his lower back. So he went and worked with Butch Harmon, and then what you noticed pretty quick with working with Butch Harmon is his head started moving more off the ball, which took all that pressure off his lower back. So you'll see a lot of tour players where their head will move slightly behind the ball. It's not a lot, but it'll move slightly behind the ball. But what we don't want to do is necessarily keep it perfectly still. You can, it works, but there is some risk to that. So I think the head can move, but the hips on the backswing should not sway. But on the downswing, there is a little bit of a lateral motion with rotations. I think that's important. Okay, if there's any other questions, please post that in there. I'll give you a few more seconds. I don't know, there's a bunch there. When you don't ask questions, I figured that I've done a decent job on answering what y'all were looking for. So if you have any other questions, please comment below. Besides that, guys, that's pretty much it as far as developing a backswing that will produce the results that you're looking for. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed this live. I want you to keep asking questions, keep commenting below. Please tell me another topic you want me to cover. I want to serve you. I want to help you play your best golf. Besides that, guys, see you next time. Peace.